here, Chris and Gail with the Trust for Learning really has some exciting news to share with you and details as you hear about these Head Start quality grants. The association is pleased to partner in advancing and sharing the word on these opportunities. And as many of you know, I have a background with Montessori, my previous career for about 15 years owning and operating schools. So the thought of bringing Montessori and ideal learning into the Head Start community in a more enhanced way is real exciting to me personally as well as professionally. So with that, I'm going to welcome Chris Ann Gale, a longtime colleague in the early learning community and someone who I have great trust in. Chris Ann, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to be having Region 9 host this information, this webinar for you today. So I thought what we would do in terms of our agenda is that first, I'll go ahead and provide a little bit of detail, and Alejandra, you can go ahead and advance the slide. I'll provide a little bit of detail and background about Trust for Learning, just to give you some context about who we are and what we do. I'd also like then to introduce you to the Ideal Learning Head Start Network. And we have both Annie Frazier and Ruthie Suni here to talk about the work of the network, which is an opportunity that you may want to join in. And then I'll go ahead and talk about our new initiatives, which are the Head Start quality grants. And we'd like to leave a good 20 minutes or so at the end for your questions. If you have questions about the network, we can certainly help to answer those, or any questions about this grant opportunity. I'd be happy to go ahead and field those as well. And if things come up along the way that you have questions about, it would be great if you could go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And that way at the end, we can go ahead and address those. Great, so we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background, if you don't know about Trust for Learning, Trust for Learning is a funder collaborative. So we work with a number of family foundations who are interested in supporting high quality early childhood education. And they're committed to expanding ideal learning programs for all children, regardless of setting. The work of Trust for Learning is guided by foundational principles of high quality early learning environments. And we call these the principles of ideal learning. They are right there listed for you on this slide. They were created a number of years ago by pedagogical experts and experts in the early childhood field to try to articulate sort of a common vision for foundational principles of what all high quality early childhood programs should look like and be, and what they believe in. And these principles were created from folks in the Montessori community, the Reggio Emilia community, Waldorf, Tools of the Mind, and other a number of other sort of leading providers of early childhood education. So everything we do is really based around these principles of ideal learning and trying to help programs to really operationalize those. Go ahead and the next slide. So as I mentioned, the Trust for Learning is a group of funders who are committed to the principles of ideal learning. And we really believe that those principles come to life through a coherent early childhood approach. And when I say coherent early childhood approach, I'm talking about an approach that may include not only just curriculum, but specific educator development that is aligned with that curriculum, perhaps specific assessments, or other sort of interventions that are all part of a very holistic approach in an early childhood program. A few of the approaches I've listed here that we work with and we believe align with the principles of ideal learning include EL education, Bank Street, I mentioned Montessori, High Scope, et cetera. Those are a few of the programs that we currently work with, the models that we work with, that we know and believe embody that sort of a ideal learning approach aligned with the principles. But we also recognize that there may be others. It's really all about the principles and less about the specific model. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So at the Trust, in order to operationalize our strategy, we really invest in 5 sort of core areas. And one of those areas is expanding ideal learning participation in and influence of Head Start. And we believe, you can see the other sort of areas of our work where we do make investments, but we believe that the Head Start piece is really central to our theory of change in trying to expand ideal learning programs for children birth through age 8. We can head to the next slide. So digging into our specific strategy in the Head Start space, over the last couple of years, we've done 2 things. The first, which Annie and Ruthie will be talking about in just a minute, is that we've been supporting a network of Head Start providers. We call it our Ideal Learning Head Start Network. Currently, we have about 24 providers that are part of that group. They meet regularly to offer support and guidance to each other. They also help to build their advocacy capacity. And it's really for programs who are currently operationalizing an ideal learning program or approach, or really aspire to do that. And they're also a Head Start provider. So that may be an opportunity that you want to think about joining. It's free and it's a great support network. And Annie and Ruthie will talk about that in a minute. The second opportunity where we have been really focused on in the last few years is the planning grants to Head Start providers who, again, are sort of aspiring or wishing to transition to ideal learning, but may need some additional help, resources, financial support, et cetera. We did provide a pilot planning grant to a provider in the Atlanta area who happens to be integrating Montessori into their program, and will open it up to Montessori classrooms this fall. And they really served as sort of our guinea pig in this effort. And we've learned a lot from that particular pilot grant, which we are now sort of incorporating into this larger effort that I'll talk about, which is this open RFP to for anyone who's a current Head Start provider to apply for. But first, I'm going to let Annie and Ruthie talk about the Ideal Learning Head Start Network.
Thank you so much, Chris-Ann. I just want to say what a pleasure and an honor it is to be able to lead and participate in the Ideal Learning Head Start Network. It has been such a joy to partner with Trust for Learning to bring this into existence. Let's see, Alejandra, will you please advance the slide? And one more. Thanks. So as Chris-Ann said, the Ideal Learning Head Start Network is a collaboration of Head Start providers from all around the country. And we meet monthly in video conference. And it was sort of funny because we were meeting by video conference before everybody in the world was meeting by video conference. It is a great way to get people from all around the country in one place together. And we meet monthly and have discussions about topics that are of importance to the providers. I'll let Ruthie talk in just a minute a little bit more about what it means to, what's meant to her as a provider to be part of that network, but I'll say a little bit more about the goals and structure. Next slide, please. And on that previous slide, the link to the Ideal Learning Head Start Network, when you get the slides after the presentation is complete, you can click on that link and it will take you to a description of the network that also has information about how to join if you're interested in becoming a part of the Ideal Learning Head Start Network. So we have really three primary goals. One is to serve as a community of practice, providing moral and logistical support to providers who are working in the Head Start space and the Ideal Learning space at the same time, because there can be challenges and complications that sometimes arise if you're doing something really different in your classrooms from what most Head Start programs are doing. There can be challenges with that and a lot of education required of the folks who support you. So that community of practice aspect is really important. We also serve as a platform for shared advocacy, and it's been really exciting and powerful for me to feel the opportunities for advocacy when you bring providers who are doing different ideal learning approaches together. And so people from the Montessori world, which is where I sort of found my home base, intersecting with Reggio Emilia folks and high scope folks and Tools of the Mind, and really working together to engage in shared advocacy on each other's behalf and to make our needs known in the Head Start world so that there can be more opportunities for ideal learning providers to comfortably fit into the Head Start world. And then finally, we are serving as an information gathering place. And the goal of this is really to lay the groundwork for more entrants. So we have created a resource bank that gathers sample documents, and this could include documentations of all kinds of things like, for example, a provider that integrates Head Start children with children funded through K-12 and through the state pre-K network into a 3-year mixed age Montessori classroom. Shared an example of their budget that they submit to Head Start so that somebody else who's thinking, could we really do that, can see an example of how to do that. We've gathered documents from the participants that show all different kinds of things that they've been able to do, as well as creating some white papers, including one about building partnerships between Head Start grantees and ideal learning providers that are not yet receiving Head Start funding. So those are kind of our big three things that we do. The heart and soul of the network is really the monthly video conference meetings for all the providers to get together and build community and learn from each other and ask questions and share what they're doing. And I think on that note, I'll turn it over to Ruthie Sooney from Lumen Education in Dallas to tell you a little bit about her program and then about what it's meant to them to be part of the Ideal Learning Head Start Network.
Right. Thank you, Annie, for that introduction, and thanks everybody for having me. I'm Ruthie Sooney. I'm the Program and Disabilities Manager for Lumen Backman Lake Community School. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of who we are and then what it's meant for us to be part of Ideal Learning. Our secret sauce or our secret ingredient is we have a home visiting program, and we have 2 toddler classrooms. All in all, we serve 220 children. Out of those, 140 are funded through Early Head Start. They are pregnant women and children up to 3 years of age. And we have 2 toddler classrooms, Montessori classrooms for children ages 18 months to 3 years of age. For the home visiting program, we use the Parents as Teachers curriculum, and we're proud to announce that we're a Blue Ribbon affiliate. That means we've checked all the 100 quality standards for Parents as Teachers. Right now, 100% of our population of clients are Hispanic, and they are recent immigrants, meaning they have not been here more than 5 years. Children are US born, but parents are from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, basically those 4 countries. Therefore, all our home visitors are bilingual, as you can tell by my accent. We try to hire culturally sensitive staff that know what the families have gone through or can relate in some way. We have a fatherhood initiative, which also follows a curriculum. It's called 24/7 Dad. they meet with the fathers. We have a fatherhood leader. He meets with the dads once a week, and to try to make the fathers more involved in the families. We have mental health professionals to help the staff and the clients. For Early Head Start, each one of our staff gets 2 hours of professional mental health services. And we have that available for our families in their homes, in their native language. And we do screenings and referrals for the children in their development, and also for the parents, assessments, family assessments for depression, or stress, parental stress scale, etc. So this is what we do. So we have parents as teachers. We're funded by Early Head Start, and we use the Montessori curriculum or the Montessori philosophy approach, or however you want to, everybody calls it. So we do have the Montessori classrooms, which is very interesting to see how we mesh up the Early Head Start requirements with a Montessori approach. We just had a audit from Early Head Start, and it's interesting. We had the Area Focus 1 audit from Early Head Start, and it's very cool to explain to them how Montessori does align with the ELOF, with the early childhood learning outcomes framework from Early Head Start, because it does. We just need to explain to them. We partner here with the Montessori Institute of North Texas. So our home visitors at least have the 2-week intro assistance to birth AMI course. So they have that, and we have a Montessori mentor in-house that goes through the Montessori basics. It's a 4-week crash course on the basics of Montessori, so they can bring it into the homes. So we're trying to make Montessori accessible for everybody, not just for the people that have the money and the means to take their children to beautiful Montessori schools. Our Montessori schools are beautiful, but we only fit 16 children. We're only funded for 16. So we bring the Montessori into the homes. And it's beautiful. We just start by, after we create the relationship with the families, we help establish a learning environment for their children. Even if we have 11 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment, it is possible to create a small learning environment for their child. And we recreate Montessori materials with recycled stuff from their homes. And we recreate a Montessori shelf, maybe out of cardboard boxes or something. So that's what we do. And what being part of the Ideal Learning Network, it's like, I was reflecting after my conversation with Annie, preparing for this. It's like when you have a multiracial child, which my children are not multiracial, but their dad is from Europe and I am from Mexico, and they were born here in the States. So how do they identify? Are they American? Are they Finnish? Are they Mexican? What are they? No. So it's the same with us. What are we? Are we Montessori? Are we PATH? Are we parents as teachers? Are we Early Head Start? We're 3 of them. It's my kids. They're all 3. They're Mexican, they're European, and they are American. So it's hard to find this kind of organization. So once we became part of the Ideal Network Learning, it's like, they understand me. They feel me. They have the same challenges, they have the same strengths, and they have the same things to overcome, because we need to fill out the requirements from parents as teachers. Know what I said, 100 quality, essential quality check boxes. We have the Early Head Start minimum standards. Montessori, you need to do what Maria Montessori said, no? And then you have your own policies and procedures. So it's great to have it's like group therapy. We meet once a month and we see where we can help each other, and what we can do. So like all those different parts are together in one room. So it's been great. It's been a great backup. Also, when we've been needing letters of support for grants, we've been getting those from Annie and other people, and that's great to have all that support. So yeah, I think, I don't know if I voiced it right, but I hope you guys got it. it's been a great support system where people speak the same language as my organization. So thank you.
Great. I think we could go ahead and move to the next slide. I'm going to talk about the second opportunity that is open currently for applications, and that is our RFP for Head Start providers for the Head Start quality grants. This is an initiative where we are wanting to help current Head Start providers who are wishing to transition or deepen their learning approach to become an ideal learning centered approach. And we hope to be, with this initiative, leveraging the federal funds that you already receive to then go a little bit further and really helping to improve the quality of your program around the goal of really implementing more individualized, experiential, and child-centered learning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some maybe common questions that you might have about the grant opportunity, and direct you to some resources that may be helpful in filling out the application. And then we can open it up for your own questions. So if we go to the next slide, just a reminder about ideal learning. So ideal learning approaches are comprehensive. They are aligned with those principles of ideal learning, which I shared in the beginning. And they really emphasize the aspects of those principles. So equity, play, the importance of relationships, the importance of the learning environment, continual educator development. We do have a resource on our website that's a part of the page that talks about these grants, that is specifically about what is an ideal learning approach. So you can take a look at that and see if that is something that your philosophy aligns with, and if that is something that you are looking at deepening in terms of your own program. I think I mentioned earlier that there are 11 programs that we currently work with, or 11 models or approaches that you can identify in your grant application as ones that you're looking at transitioning to, and those range. But you can also select a category of other in applying for this grant, and specifically, submit a one-page summary about how you think your particular model approach that you're wanting to pursue aligns with those principles of ideal learning. We can go to the next slide. Another sort of commonly asked question is, well, what can I use the grant funds for? And sort of based on our previous experience and our working with this pilot grantee, we have developed what we're calling the Head Start planning framework that we've provided also for potential applicants to really help them think through the types of activities that they would want to consider over the next year in helping them plan for implementation of ideal learning next fall. So this particular planning framework sets out some major categories that you would want to really think about and delve into much more deeply, where you can actually, that you can use to sort of outline what different expenses you might have. So for example, we can go to the next slide, and I'll mention them here. So the framework outlines sort of what is your vision for your program. It also talks a lot about community engagement. So how are you going to actually engage the parents, the families, your community around this sort of transition or deepening of the learning in your program? There may be costs associated with hosting those community meetings or events. There may be things that you want to do to sort of survey the community that you could potentially use grant funding for. Another really important piece, I think, of thinking about this transition is engaging the right partners for technical assistance, thought partnership, and help with the actual transition. And so funding could definitely be provided for that type of technical assistance. And we have provided as part of the package some examples and of folks from different approaches. So if you're really thinking about, wanting to implement Montessori, we have some folks that are really steeped in technical assistance around Montessori that could help you. Likewise, Waldorf, tools of the mind, etc. So engaging the right partner is key, and resources can be used for that. If you were wanting to do sort of a deep analysis or sort of comparison between Head Start learning outcomes and the or performance outcomes, and then the particular pedagogical approach that you're wanting to implement, that type of crosswalk or analysis of planning is also something that resources could be used for. The learning environment itself for many of these approaches or models may need to be enhanced. And so thinking about what types of materials, supplies, other things for the classroom might be needed to transition. That is another area where funding could be utilized. And finally, teacher training. Some ideal learning models require specific types of teacher training, or even to purchase, if you have curriculum that you need to purchase. So all of these are potentially areas where you might want to think about where you would need funding, and you can utilize the grant funding for those purposes. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's just some more general information about the grant opportunity. These would be one-year grants to providers. You need to be a Head Start provider currently to be eligible for these funds. You could be a Head Start provider of any kind. So you don't necessarily need to be a direct grantee. You could be a delegate agency, or you could be a contractor to a direct grantee, a partner. I know different areas call them different things, but you do have to be implementing and providing Head Start services to a population. And then I did mention the technical assistance piece of these grants. We do really think that that is extremely important from what we've learned so far in our process. They're not required, but highly encouraged that if you're thinking about, implementing Waldorf, or thinking about transitioning to a Reggio Emilia philosophy, that you do engage somebody as a partner to help you think through that and provide assistance. So not required, but I think highly encouraged. And then in terms of funding amounts, we're really basing that on the number of children that your program serves. So if you are a Head Start provider and you serve less than 50 children, the range of that one-year grant would be between $20,000 and $25,000. Likewise, if you serve more than 200 children, the grant size would be larger. The sort of upper end of a grant would be $40,000 for the year. And we would also encourage you to think about applying, in consortia. So if there are a number of providers in your area that are interested in moving to more of a emergent curriculum sort of Reggio Emilia approach, let's say, you may want to partner together as part of this grant opportunity, and you'd be, sharing your learnings. I think there would be some economies of scale there, and you would be eligible probably for a larger grant size. We can go to the next slide. We have outlined a few priorities in this grant application process, which means that we will be giving extra consideration and weight to grantees who are serving Native American, American Indian and Native Alaskan populations, or who are serving migrant and seasonal populations. We're also giving additional weight and consideration to, as I mentioned, networks of providers. So if you wanted to apply as a consortium, or if you're a provider, maybe you're a direct grantee and you operate multiple program sites. We'd also like to really try to leverage early Head Start childcare partnerships that are able to provide services full day, year round. So we'd be looking to prioritize those types of programs. And then finally, if you have a philanthropic partner locally who is interested in supporting a piece of your of this grant, we would also like to prioritize those types of relationships. So if there's a local foundation that you have that's willing, to pitch in $5,000, $10,000 towards this effort, that is something that we want to encourage, and those folks would be given priority in sort of the scoring and determination process. And to be clear, this would have to be funding that was specifically for this purpose. It couldn't be ongoing funding that you currently get from a foundation partner already. We can go ahead to the next slide. I believe we might be able to open it up now for any questions that you have. And I know that Ed has been monitoring the chat, so I'll let him go ahead and take that, and I'll try to field your questions as best as I'm able.
Sure, and I have two questions, and then we're a small enough group, Chris and I, suggesting folks could probably raise their hand. Alejandro will take them off mute and they can ask questions directly as well. So if you have a question, folks, you can get that ready. Two questions that came to me in the chat. The first is, if a Head Start program is operating multiple sites, multiple classrooms, and only want to look at this project for, say, 2 classrooms at a particular site, are they available to apply, or is it an agency-wide transition that you're interested in funding? That's one.
Yep, so they would be eligible to apply. It would be important that they clarify in their application that they're looking at implementing or transitioning this for only 2 classrooms. So that would be probably the 50 or less category. But yes, they're definitely open to apply.
Great. And the second, if a Montessori organization is interested in partnering, just to be clear, they would have to have a lead applicant as the Head Start agency, and they could then be involved with them, but the lead applicant needs to come from a Head Start grantee, delegate, or partner organization.
Yes, that is correct.
Great.
But we do think that there are, approaches out there, such as, various Montessori folks or others who have existing partnerships or relationships already with some Head Start providers who, maybe are interested in moving in that direction. And so want to encourage them to have conversations and get those folks to apply.
Excellent. Question in the chat: have you already created a guide to align Head Start standards with different ideal models?
So that's interesting. We do not have a full-blown guide, but we do have a framework crosswalk that we have done. It's actually been done by our partners in Colorado, Early Milestones, that does I would call it a high-level crosswalk of 4 different ideal learning approaches with the Head Start outcomes framework. So I can definitely, I don't think that is included actually on our website with the grant announcement, but we can definitely include, we can definitely put it there if it's not already there.
And I was looking at your library, and boy, there are a ton of great resources there, including some guides around family engagement and other key issues to Head Start. So you've collected lots of great documents through your network already.
Yeah, I think actually, Annie, you could probably answer this. I think actually that crosswalk that I mentioned is in our resource library, is it not?
I think it is, but I can double check.
Question from my friend in Pasadena, Judy Cashel. How does this approach describe or require a research-based curriculum, which is required by the Office of Head Start and the program performance standards?
I'm going to let Annie take that one because I know that this has come up a lot in the network.
Sure. So actually, all of the approaches that Chris-Ann had up on her slide as sort of identified ideal learning approaches are research-based. And I think one of the things that could be useful in being part of the network was connecting with people who have marshaled the research and can identify like where are the places where we can look for the research that will show that this ideal learning approach does meet the needs of children and helps them really flourish and exceed the Head Start standards. So I think that any of the ideal learning approaches that you might select, they're all based in research, and there's significant research to support them. It's a matter of identifying and finding it, and that's something I think the Ideal Learning Head Start Network members can help with. But I love the idea of compiling some kind of a document that could sort of talk about, looking across various ideal learning approaches, what's the research that supports them? I think that's actually a really interesting idea for a future document.
Yeah, we're actually coming out with a evidence brief about the principles of ideal learning this fall, which we've had a lot of researchers compiling. Unfortunately, it's like not going to be ready by the time applications are due, but that will also be a great resource, for folks in the future to identify the research that corresponds and articulates to each of those principles. But I will say that I have been privy to conversations, one recently where they were talking about, well, how did the Reggio Emilia folks put the paperwork together necessary to identify the emergent curriculum as evidence-based, and what did they actually show to the Head Start folks to be able to support that. And those are the types of resources that are so helpful and important that a technical assistance provider could really be very useful in.
One question on my side, I loved Ruthie's description of home visiting efforts to include Montessori, having the home visitors schooled in Montessori principles and creating that in the home. I'm wondering, Ruthie, if you can share what were sort of the initial takeaways as that network lifted off in comparison to other parts of your service that maybe did not use Montessori or ideal learning.
Say that again. I'm not sure I understood your question, Ed.
Did you convert all of your home visitors network to using Ideal Learning, or did you do just a portion?
Got it.
And then you were able to see some of the differences as the time went on with those families?
Good question. We started with a pilot. I was part of that pilot. We started on, so we have 14 parent educators. Each parent educators or home visitors have 10 families. So the pilot was with 4 of us. So because it is a lot what encompasses, it has to do a lot with the training and changing the mindset of the home visitors and the families, because you're going to transition your families, right, from what you had to the new Ideal Learning. So it was a challenge, but once we saw the results from the families and ourselves as the providers, we just transitioned everybody. So that's when we partnered with Mint, and we were able to send people to the 2-week training, and everybody started implementing. We had the in-house Montessori mentorship, and now as people come, like right now I'm hiring 3 new staff. So first they go to their PAD training, then we talk about early Head Start quality standards, and now after that they have the Montessori mentorship in-house, and in the summer we will send them for the 2 weeks. So ideally everybody's doing that, the same approach. So it's not only some families or only some providers, it's everybody.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Good to hear. And just again, a question in the chat. Is there an opportunity to start with a couple classes and then apply for future expansion of funds in the future? So slightly different. You covered the starting with a couple classes. How is follow-up funding available or considered?
So we really do see these as almost like startup funds to get you going. And we anticipate that the expenses are, some of them are one-time expenses, like engaging the community about whether or not this, they're interested in this transition, or purchasing the supplies that will be needed for the classroom, or initially getting your teachers trained, or doing, some of that sort of research analysis. So the thought is not that there would be potential perpetual ongoing funding every year, but that really that once you are able to transition to this approach, that Head Start, dollars would cover the implementation of the program.
Great, thank you. Other questions? I'm watching the chat.
I will go ahead and say it may be helpful for folks to know that we are looking for grant applications to be submitted by September 12th. And that we are looking at making awards in November. So it'll be a relatively quick turnaround time. We would like, we anticipate those funds to be used really over the course of the year, so that by fall of next year, you could then, have teachers trained, have materials, supplies, all of that sort of planning and upfront work done, and be able to begin implementing next year.
Wonderful. One clarification, in California, we have a lot of programs that are stacking funding to create full day opportunities. I believe in your priorities, you mentioned full day as a goal for blended learning. For those programs who have expanded into a longer day with their own funding, that would also be welcome. So programs that have an extended day through their own program options.
Absolutely, yeah. We're wanting to be able to provide this level of quality experience for children and families for as long as possible in the day, and as long as possible throughout the calendar year. So that's an important point to emphasize in the grant application.
Great. Well, Chris-Ann, I don't see any additional questions. I think one came in when our applications due. I think you just clarified that. So I think we've covered all the questions that were in the chat box and questions that I had as well. We sure appreciate the overview.
Yeah, and let me go ahead and say that if you do have more questions after you take a further look at the grant opportunity on our website, you definitely, there's a link there to submit questions. The website is listed here on the slide where you can find out more about the opportunity and some of those resources that I talked about. And we'd love for you to also sign up for our regular newsletter and listserv, because we do have other types of announcements and funding opportunities that we do provide in our other areas of work. So we'd love for you to be a part of our community.
And we do have, before we break, we do have one hand raised. Alejandra, if you can unmute Norman.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to hear about this very innovative opportunity for providers. As a Montessori educator, do you provide a list to those that apply for the grant, that in our case, if they do choose to pursue Montessori education, that they would be offered a list such as MACD accredited courses? We have a nationwide organization that we are affiliated with, MACD.org, M-A-C-T-E. Is that provided to those individuals if they do have interest in Montessori, given that although we're in California, we provide a distance learning online remote program?
Well, our hope is that an individual program that is looking to transition to Montessori will reach out to those in the Montessori community or some of the technical assistance providers that we've already listed to be able to then learn much more about what would be, what would be entailed, what the training offerings are, what the programs are, et cetera. So we have provided a list of people to reach out to for Montessori, for example.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
I think we're good.
Well, I wanna thank Chris-Ann, Ruthie, and Annie for having such a wonderful presentation. And I also wanna thank Edward Condon for facilitating the Q&A. This webinar is recorded and will be made available within 24 hours of the recording. And there will also be a follow-up email with resources as well as the copy of the PowerPoint. If you have any further questions, you can visit the website on the PowerPoint. And thank you very much. Thank you to the presenters and the wonderful presentation.